With us today is Harry Kraemer. He is such a delightful person that I'm really, really happy to bring him back on the podcast. He's been on the podcast before. His latest book is Your 168. Put your values first and focus on what matters most. He's a professor of management and strategy at Kellogg University of Management at Northwestern University, where he was Professor of the Year. You'll soon understand why he got that designation. He's also an executive partner at a private equity firm and was the former chairman and CEO of Baxter, which is a multi-billion-dollar global healthcare company. And one of the things that I'm delighted about with Harry, not only being a sort of stellar human being, which is really important to me. In fact, Harry, I'll just tell you that the coaching that I'm doing now, I've gotten clear that I'm looking to, and I've been very clear about this and said no to certain clients and yes to others, that I'm helping people become exceptional leaders and stellar human beings. And if they're not interested in both sides of that, which is fine, like there's nothing wrong with not being interested in both sides, but if they're not, I'm the wrong guy, because this stellar human being part feels really, really important to me. And you are a great example of a stellar human being. And I'm also excited that you have both the thought leadership on the one hand and the very, very practical experience of executive leadership on the other. So I'm going to bring both of those into the conversation. Welcome to the Bregman Leadership Podcast, Harry.
It is great to be with you. I should actually write all this down and show it to my 5 kids because they don't respect me the same way you apparently do. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Well, share the podcast with them, and then anytime they want to call me, they can call me and I'll let them know.
That's great. That's good.
Okay, Harry, you're 168. What are your 168?
Yeah. So in my classes, Peter, I always will ask the students, about 168, the most important number, and they'll say, well, what's 168? It turns out, Peter, I don't know how many of your listeners, but about 1 out of 10 people know it. But if I say to you, Peter, well, Peter, what kind of week are you doing? How hard are you working this week? Often they'll say, this week I'm 24/7. I'll say, okay, slow down, multiply it out. Usually you get 168, right? So the reality of life, Peter, is as crazy as we are, everybody gets 168 hours a week. That's what you get, all right? And how you spend that time and what you do with it and what you don't do with it and what matters, that's the whole thought process around when I say you're 168.
And it's interesting because as I was reading it, I was thinking, I love this idea of don't evaluate a day, evaluate a week. And when I started doing it in my head and I said, so let me think about yesterday. And I thought, yesterday? I don't even know what I did yesterday. I can't remember what I did yesterday.
And I don't know what day it was yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, yeah, right. I don't know what day it was yesterday. But I thought that was really interesting because, we could be so present to what we're doing in the moment, but actually, I was mentioning before the call, there was a couple of days ago where I was so busy and then I stopped halfway through the day and I said, I've been so busy, but I'm not getting anything done. I'm not getting anything useful or important done. Yeah. And then I chose with 1 hour of my 168 to, now that I'm we're recording this during pandemic time and I'm up in the Catskills, get on my mountain bike and go ride for an hour. And that kind of helped me a lot. But that was of that day, that was the best use of my 1 hour of 168.
Well, and that actually, Peter, is a great example because what usually happens is you take people that are very active, you and I, a lot of your listeners, and we just keep going faster and faster. And when we realize we may not get everything done, well, then we'll just multitask. And the question I always ask executives, the question I ask students very practically is, have we confused activity and productivity? Or are we moving so fast, we have no idea how productive we are. Let's just keep moving. It was your comment a minute ago of, hey, I'm running around, but did I get anything done? I don't know. Let's just keep moving. And I think the people that really are value-based leaders literally stop and say, wait a second, take a time out. Let me be a little self-reflective here. Let me get off by myself, take a ride on my mountain bike, decompress, and literally think, what really matters?
Right.
What are my values? What's my purpose? What am I doing all this for?
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting, so again, we're recording this during the pandemic and it's been 3.5 months since I moved out of New York City and I'm at a house in the Catskills. And I am just now, 3.5 months later, beginning to feel the edges of the start of relaxing.
Yes.
And it's like the pent up busyness and drive and continuous movement of years, I'm kind of like, I'm just starting to feel the edges of that. So, Harry, let's go all the way back. Let's go to your childhood. I'm very interested in your path. Like, you are a leader, you're a teacher, you're a thinker, and I think a lot of our listeners also are interested in people who, have arrived to CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company and are very, very thoughtful about their journey. So share with us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you get started? What are some values-based or not, decision points that you made that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah. So fun, Peter. So actually born in New York, actually in Queens. My grandfather was a history teacher. My dad was a salesman. So we moved around New York, out at Long Island, but I've lost most of my accent. And then we lived in Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, a little town, Clark Summit. And my dad ended up getting transferred then to the Midwest, to Minneapolis. I went to a small college in Wisconsin, Lawrence University, liberal arts. And then worked for a while with a bank, and then ended up going to Kellogg, and then eventually ended up at Baxter. But to your point, a couple of things in your life that happen. So when I lived in northeastern Pennsylvania, Peter, and I may have mentioned this to you in the past, my uncle was a priest. And if you're going to church, or you're going to a temple, a synagogue, whatever, and somebody who's a cleric. You get to know them very well. And at least in our church, they always used to say, well, Harry, we need more pastors. We need more priests. It's really desperate. We really need more. And I remember, I think I was like 14 years old, and I went back, and every Friday night, my uncle would come over, and I'd say, hey, Uncle Francis, I said, I think I'm going to sign up for this. Sign up for what? Well, to be a priest. He goes, oh, this is fantastic. You got a calling. I said, Father Francis, I got to tell you, I definitely do not have a calling. And I said, I'd rather not do it. But here's the simple math of this, because I was already in the math at 40. I said, A, we need more. B, if any of my friends do this, we're going to have a major problem. I mean, I know these characters, okay? So somebody's got to pick up the slack, and it's me. And it had a big impact on me because it was very interesting. He said, Harry, every priest, every minister, every rabbi I know, he said, we all have the same issues. The people that come to our institutions, we can take care of. But I'm always sensitive to the people that are out there in the real world. And he said, Harry, if you end up going into teaching or business or whatever, and you always say, hey, what example can I set? What are the values? And through your example, you can make a really big impact. And I thought, well, that's great. I don't have to become a priest, thank God. And I've always thought about that. And even when I started at Baxter, and by the way, people say to me, how did that happen? Well, I started as a junior financial analyst for 2 years at Baxter. I forgot to leave, and I was there for 24 years. Okay. So small businesses, large businesses. I spent time in international, was the CFO, was the president, chairman, and CEO. And it was very, very interesting, Peter, just that ability and a couple of events that happened to me to get into this think about self-reflection. It just sort of impacts the way I think of the world and how you treat people. What's your mission? What do you want to do? What's your purpose? And it's been fantastic.
All right, so let me ask you a couple of questions here. I love it. I love the story. So you have this conversation with your uncle, and here's my question: because the story is very vibrant. Like, I'm heading in this direction, and I have this conversation, and I realize I got to move somewhere else, and that's the narrative. And I'm curious the reality behind the narrative. Like, were you having doubts? Were you not sure? Were there other thought? Like to make that turn to go, I'm going to be a priest. Actually, I'm going to go into business. Yeah. These are life decisions that people struggle with all the time, and I'm curious. If you can remember, like, just even little snippets of the influences in making and moving towards that decision. I think it's the complexity of it. I think could be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So here I am. I'm like 13, right? Going into 8th grade. I really did have a spiritual perspective of, hey, we're here for a very short period of time. What impact do you make on the world? And I thought, I need to do that. But, hey, I kind of was at 13, 14. So I'm starting to think about girls.
So that's younger than I thought. I get it. I get that.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, hey, you know what? If I can I keep things very simple, Peter, by the way. I keep things very, very simple. And so I kind of looked at it as I like to make a difference. And if in order to make a difference, that's what I've got. Oh, wait a minute. If I can make a difference, whether it's business, whether it's teaching or whatever, and I could feel good about that, that's a pretty straightforward way to think about it. And then I love math, and I love the idea of learning, and I loved interacting with people, and that's sort of how it evolved.
And so you joined Baxter as a financial analyst. 24 years later, 24 years, is that right? You become CEO.
No, I joined the company, and I guess it was only 15 years later, because
15 years later, and then you were CEO for that period of time.
Yeah.
So did you, at what point did you have an aspiration that says, hey, I kind of want to run this company?
Peter, you ask fantastic questions. This comes up. This is where when we're serious, you have to have a sense of humor. This comes up a lot, and usually people say, "Well, when did you decide?" And it's always a little disappointing for the students when I say, "Well, hey, I never even thought I'd be a vice president. I certainly never thought I'd be. I never thought." And of course, the student reaction is, "Eyeball roll. Here we go. Here's another one of those humility things again." And Peter, with your training and coaching, and you'll appreciate this. Well, the way I think about it is, and tell me whether you agree or tell me what you think of this. If you're the kind of leader where, what are you all about? You're all about relationships, developing people, developing the team, making it all happen. You're very excited about that. And interestingly enough, I tell people, Peter, that when people say, "Oh, well, you were the CEO of Baxter when you were 42 as a $12 billion company, you must have been very bright." And I said, well, no, here's the reality. If I'm really honest with myself, and I tell this to the students, I had two very good things going for me. Intelligence wasn't one of them. Number one, I knew everybody. I mean, my ability, when I talk about leadership, Chief, this little simple model I may have told you. Leadership through the ability to influence people. How do you influence people? You relate. If I can relate to you, I can and lead you. That's it. That's as complicated as I get. And I love the idea that I'm spending time with wild and crazy sales guys. I'm spending time in the R&D lab with PhDs and fields I know nothing about. And what I realized was two things. If you know and can relate to everybody, and you know who the really good people are, number one. And number two, you create an environment that everybody wants to work for you. As I told the students the other night, here's a simple formula. If you know who all the good people are and they all want to work for you, you're going to do phenomenally well. And now, again, here's that balance, Peter. Did I have aspirations of becoming a vice president? No. In fact, here's another crazy one, Peter. I set up 3 criteria through my self-reflection when I was at Kellogg. 3 criteria. Do I stay in the job I'm in? Do I stay in the company I'm in, but a different job, or do I go someplace else? Interesting enough, Peter, I use the same 3 criteria 40 years later. If you call me and say, hey, Harry, could you go on this board? 3 criteria. If I continue to do this, will I have the opportunity to learn and grow? If I'm not learning and growing, I'm going backwards. 2, will I have the opportunity to add value with a team and make something happen? Or somebody paying me a lot of money and I'm just watching grass grow and paint dry? And 3, am I having fun? And so from my perspective, I volunteered for everything. When they said, hey, somebody needs to run this small division that's losing money. Oh, that sounds like fun. I could learn something. I think I could add some value. Now, the flip side of it is, while that was my criteria, what did I know? I think I knew, Peter, that if you were the CEO and you called me and said, hey, Harry, we want you to become the CFO, I knew I could pull it off because I knew who the people were. So that I would need to do it. So I thought, hey, whatever comes up, fine. But I'm literally trying to do my life balance. I'm trying to balance, my family, my spirituality, my health, fun, having a good time, making a difference. So I kind of thought of it as, hey, if the stars align and that opens up, super. But if those 3 criteria happen, I'm not going to be one of these guys coming home to my spouse. Well, I don't know if I'm going to become a vice president and my whole life's going to change, because I decided I'm never going to let my job identify who I am. I'm not going to do that.
So you decide, it's like our joint friend Alan Mulally, who is so good at who is the CEO of Boeing and the CEO of Ford, who's so good at creating a process, right? A process that works, and then following it with zero tolerance for deviation. And so what you're saying is, that's what I've done. I've created a process, which are these 3 questions, right? And I'm asking myself those questions. And if the answer is yes to each of those questions, then I do it. And if the answer is no to any of them, then I don't. And I don't have to think about what is the outcome going to be about this? I just have to think about, these are my 3 guiding questions, and I'm going
Exactly.
to ask those questions.
All right.
And the first one was,
If I do this, will I be able to learn and grow? Am I
right,
learning?
right. Will I be able to learn and grow? 2
My
is, will I be able to make a difference? And 3 is, am I going to have fun?
having fun. Yeah, yeah.
And then you don't think too much about the implication of the next step. You just think, does it meet these criteria?
Exactly, exactly. And interestingly enough, the reason why that seems to make sense to me is that if I'm of the view of that's my criteria, I want to treat you, Peter, and everybody that works with me the way I'd like to be treated. We're a team. Hey, if you got an idea, let me know what it is. By the way, if I got to go up and see the president to make a presentation, you work for me. You're coming with me. And it's all about my team, and it's
Right.
all about trying to do the best. And interestingly enough, if one day I tell the students this. If one day I woke up and I said, I'm a vice president, you know what? I'm going for it. I'm going to become the CEO. Well, that day, it's no longer about the team. Now it's all about me. And if it's all about me, it's no longer about Peter and Joe and Jim. Okay. And that's why I don't think, if you're not wired up the way I'm describing, you're going to lose a lot of respect. People may tolerate you, but there's not going to be the respect and the camaraderie and the fun you'd have if it's not. That's what I think.
So Harry, there's never a moment when you're like sitting in the office going, I'm CEO. I'm CEO. I'm the head of this. I'm 42 years old, and I'm the head of a $12 billion. Like, yes, all those other things there, but how cool is that? Like,
Yeah.
you never had that moment?
So okay, again, Peter, when I say ask me anything, push anything, interestingly enough, I thought, hey, isn't this great? Isn't this great? But I never ever, Peter, let it get to me. And I'll give you some good examples. And again, I got a lot of flaws. We can talk about all my flaws. But on this kind of stuff, Peter, there was a perspective of never forget where you came from, keep things in perspective. All right. In fact, here's a great way. I literally, in my 4 principles, okay, I literally talk, as you've heard me, I talk about self-reflection. I talk about balance. I talk about true self-confidence, and I talk about genuine humility. And to me, this genuine humility thing, Peter, here's one for all your listeners. I have a very simple way of figuring out, does somebody have genuine humility? I literally will say, hey, Joe, successful guy, CEO, CFO, how did you get to where you are, Joe? 90% of people I talk to say, well, how did I get there? Well, I worked very, very hard.
Right,
I worked
right.
very, very hard.
Right.
And I have some skill sets. And the combination of working hard and skill sets, that's how I got to where I am. And then somebody will say to me, well, Harry, how did you get to where you are? I said, well, yeah, I worked hard, skill set, but there's a big 5, the big 5 that happened to me. No particular order. Math guys, we number things. How about luck? How about timing? How about the team? How about mentors? And then for some of us, there's a spiritual perspective of it. Some of us have a religious perspective. And if any of those work for you, what do you start to realize? You never forget where you came from. You keep things in perspective. At Baxter, we said you don't read your own press clippings. And the higher up you go, this is a big one, Peter. The higher up you go, there better be a few people who knew you before you became a big shot, right? Because on the way to becoming a big shot, there will be people that are going to say, "Oh, well, you're amazing, you're remarkable." And if you're not careful, you could actually believe it.
So
okay?
I have dinner once a month, and I have for over 30 years, once a month with a bunch of friends from high school, and we now that we're in a pandemic, we have a Zoom call once a week. But just to confirm that, one of the things I love is I said to my, I was on the phone with them a couple of days ago, and I said, "So, what do you guys think of my beard? I'm thinking about keeping my beard." And to a T, they were like, "Do not keep your beard. It looks awful." And they said, like, one of my friends said, you know those movies where literally in one scene someone goes from whatever age they are to 30 years older? That's you with a beard. And so it is very helpful to have a group of people who know you really, really well and will tell you the truth.
And it's interesting, Peter. I almost get emotional about it, and I know how sincere you are. It interests me so much that if you truly, it's beyond words, if you truly realize you never forget where you came from. Yeah, we've been blessed. We're fortunate. You're up in the Catskill. I mean, okay, but you never forget that. And so for me, when I go into a building, in fact, I'll give you another great example. In my classes, we have this brand new, amazing Kellogg building now on the lake, 5 stories, all glass, really on the water, $300 million. And I'll tell the students, I'll say, all right, how many of you want to be leaders? How many of you really want to manage large groups of teams? I said, now don't raise your hand. I don't want to embarrass anybody. How many of you know the names of the 2 people at the reception desk when you walk in the building? And how many of you know the names of the 4 people serving food in the cafeteria? Okay. And how many of you know how many kids each one of them have? And do you know that 2 of those people serving in line have got kids that have gotten scholarships into Princeton? And I said, I cannot walk into that building without finding out how Chris is doing, how Ken's doing, and it's Kenn, okay? And why has it got 2? I mean, because you never forget. And that you create, and I always think of it, Peter, it's like the ultimate win-win. It's the right kind of values. It just feels good. But the crazy part of it is, even if that light didn't go on, okay, you do it anyway because that's how you build teams.
Right.
That's how you energize a group of people. Right. It's actually pretty simple.
Okay, so let's turn to the book, Harry, and you talk about articulating and being super clear about your values, and then breaking that up into a number of different categories so that you can understand, what your values are in each of those categories, and then really tracking and assessing yourself on how am I doing with each of these things. It's like if you want to lose weight, keep a food diary. If you want to live a value-based life, keep a value-based diary. Am I encapsulating this correctly?
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job.
Great.
Yeah, you're doing a good job.
So here was my first question. I want to go over the 4 foundational principles of value-based leadership because I really love them. And I talk about this all the time, and I loved reading that you had shaped it this way, and I've seen this from previous conversations and previous books: self-confidence and humility. And I think those 2 things together are critical, and most people don't get it right. So I always think it's worth spending a little bit of time on that. But here was my essential question about values. So when I sit down, and I get a little overwhelmed with the whole thing, but when I sit down and I go, okay, so what are my values, and am I living my values? I always realize that like it or not, I'm already living my values, meaning I'm making choices every day. And I think about you bring up someone in the golfer, a guy Bill, you call him Bill, who's playing golf all weekend and he wants to meet with you. And you're like, well, when do you want to meet? Saturday? No, I'm playing golf all day. How about Sunday? No, I'm playing golf all day. And it's like, okay, so what are, like if he really wants to meet, then he needs to shape his life around his values. My thought as I read that is, and you talk about the cognitive dissonance between, kind of what is real and how I live. Yeah. My challenge is when we identify our values, they are very often aspirational values versus actual values. And if I'm playing golf all weekend, it's probably because even though I don't want to say it out loud, being out by myself or with a group of friends, playing golf, etc., I'm thinking in Bill's mind, like that's really actually his value. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't do it. So how do you help people, and how do you grapple with the dissonance of actual lived values versus aspirational values?
Yeah.
Does my question make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And this is one, it's kind of fun to mix up. So this one, I probably disagree with you. And here's the thought process. And you should challenge us. I mean, I love we can mix it up. We can always do this again. Here's the fun part for me. I think that the disconnect for many people is they don't take the time to be self-reflective. And when I say self-reflective, I literally mean spending some quiet time thinking about, why do I do what I do? And based on why I do what I do, is that what I really want to do? And I think what happens is if you don't take the time to do this, and I talk about this in this book now, I literally remember the second chapter is, I'm surprised you're surprised, right? So the example would be, and this happens all the time, Peter, is I run into a former student and at the airport. Hey, you've read, hey, Joe, how are you doing? Well, I'm just really surprised. Well, Joe, what are you surprised by? Well, I'm married now. I have 2 small children, and I have no relationship with my 2 kids, and I'm just really surprised. Well, Joe, do you spend time with your 2 kids? No, I don't spend any time with them at all. Okay, well, I'm surprised you're surprised. But see, the interesting part, Peter, is I'm so open, okay, I'll use you, okay, I'm making it up. If you said to me, Harry, my career is so important that, hey, if I have to sacrifice my marriage or my kids, I'm willing to do that. Now, that may be to some people, oh boy, I don't know if I'd want to do that. But the beauty of taking the time to realize that's what's important to you, then that's perfect. But the problem I find is the number of people that are doing things and they haven't really thought through why they're doing it. And as soon as they think it through, they actually change. Not because that's different than their values, but they just have student 2 weeks ago. Student comes up to me 2 weeks ago. Well, Harry, I'm trying to decide. Okay, Elizabeth. Well, I'm trying to decide. Should very bright gal. Should I go to work for McKinsey or Bain? And I'll say, okay, wait a minute. Okay, let's think about it. Now, before we answer that question, why do you want to be a consultant? I mean, that could be fine. Why do you want to do that? And the look on their face, somebody gave me this description of MEGO, MEGO, which stands for my eyes glaze over. They hadn't even thought about it. Okay. Right. And I said, now you mind traveling 90% of the time? Do you realize you're going to be traveling? Well, no, I don't want to travel that much. Well, but that's what you're going to be doing. Oh, okay. And so Peter, I can give you a lot of examples where because people don't think about what they're doing, they end up surprised. Right. And that's why I say I'm surprised you're surprised.
I like what you're saying. And actually what you're saying, so I'm going to change what I've said, which is that it's not actual values versus aspirational values as much as it is habits versus values. So like you're describing people in a number of habits and they haven't stopped to play out going, what is this, if I continue with this habit, what am I going to look like in 10 years?
And Peter, it goes even further than that. So maybe you'll have seen this as well. A habit I've seen. I don't know if it's a habit. I don't know if it's even a habit or just you're not thinking. Great example. A guy does really well, does super well. You know these people. Suddenly they're 45 years old. They've got 3 kids, and they decide they got a big windfall. They're going to build a house. Now, instead of saying, well, there's a lot of nice houses. Oh, no, I'm going to build a house. It's only going to take 6 months. Well, Joe, I can tell you, it's going to take you 3 years. Okay. Well, no, it's going to. So they spend 3 years. I mean, you know these people. They spend the time and the arguments and the fights. But now they got it. They finally got it. 3 years of sweat and tears. So I don't see this person for like 6-7 years. Well, then I run into him at the airport. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Well, pretty good, Harry, but, market's not good. We're in the process of downsizing. Why? Well, Harry, all 3 of the kids, they're off at college now, right? And, of course, what I want to say to the guys, did you not realize, Joe, 8 years ago that all of your children would be 8 years older and the 10-year-old, who's the youngest, that no one will be there in this 20,000 square foot house? And you look at the guy, and he's surprised. And it's like, that's not even a habit. It's like, what were you thinking? And my conclusion is you weren't thinking.
Right.
Okay? Now, and if you said, hey, I want this. This is what I want. And you know what? I'll figure it out. But this guy was literally surprised. I mean, he was just, worried about now selling the house. All right. It's and I can give you examples like that, Peter, at every age.
So let me ask you. So great. What's a brick wall?
Brick wall. Okay, here's the concept on this one, and people can kind of visualize this in your mind. Let's say when you were in New York and I'm in Chicago, I think it's Route 80 that takes you from Chicago to New York. All right. So when I talk about this life balance, right? And by the way, you've heard me. I never talk about work-life balance because it's like you're either working or you're living. What does that mean? Okay. You and I are working up, Peter. If that's not living, that's a problem. Okay. So it's life balance. So the way I think about life balance, it's not achieving it, it's pursuing it. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. Okay. Now, so here's a little analogy I'm fooling around with lately. Tell me if this works for you. I'm going to go to visit you. I'm driving from Chicago to New York. If I was perfect and I was really balanced, straight line, I don't get off the road, I'm there. Now, what's the real world? Real world is there's exit ramps. Okay. I want to stop at Dairy Queen for a brief or something. Okay. Now, or I got to get gas. Now, if you think about that, if I'm doing it correctly, I'm going to try to stay that little sine wave pretty close to this, all right? And the key of self-reflection, I know I got off the highway. I know I want to lose 30 pounds, but you know what? Hey, tonight I want to have pizza, and I know I better get on a bike tomorrow. I better get on the mountain bike. So you get off. However, if you get off and you don't realize you're off, all right. You guys, you and I know where, well, I'm going to work 100 hours, but it's only for a week. And if I think about it, it's almost like you've got off at an exit ramp and you're on your way to Atlanta. No, I was going to see Peter in New York. And it's in my mind, that's you hit the wall. you gain 50 pounds. Your family's broken up. You got a heart attack, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? And that ability to realize, hey, I'm only human. I got my faults. I'm got temptations, whatever. But I better stay close enough to that. And when you don't, you hit the wall. And unless you get your act together again, you never recover.
Um, First of all, have you hit a wall?
Honestly, no.
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 Okay.
And
So
part of that, Chief, is just because I've been doing this self-reflection and these silent retreats for 40 years.
right. So here's my question. There's an advantage in some ways in terms of the methodology that we're talking about of hitting a wall. Because
Yeah.
you hit a wall and the wall says, what I've been doing up until now is not working. I have to change.
Yep.
What if you don't hit a wall? Meaning, like I think in terms of the conversation we're having, which is how do you stay on track to your values? There are people who hit a wall and have to self-reflect. They have to think about what their values are because literally the way they've been doing it clearly isn't working. I find that there's a lot of people for whom the way they're doing it is pretty much working. You know what? Let's use me as an example. So I love what I'm doing. I do it. I really love it. Actually, it's working for me in every single way. And I still notice my own little nudges, like soul is really interesting to me. I'm really finding myself taken with the concept of soul, and I'm finding myself, nudging towards more interested in people than organizations. Like I love organizations. I've consulted. I've always worked with organizations, but the people side of it is attracting me more than it has before. I'm a little more interested in coaching leaders as people than I am in coaching leadership teams to achieve results. Like I'm just noticing that. Now, I like what I do. Nothing's going wrong. I'm fine. I've got actually the good life balance, right? I'm close with my family. And yet I'm finding myself nudging in this direction, and I have to give up some things that are going right in order to pursue something that's engaging me and I'm moving towards. And I don't know whether that's the right thing to do. And my values are not, it's not just black and white. It's not like, oh, I'm doing something now and it's not working. I'm doing something and it's working and I like it. And yet there's this other thing, and I have to risk what I'm doing a little bit in order to pursue this other thing. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. So I just want to bring in this, like, the sort of grayness of this for many people.
Okay, and the way I think about it, Peter, and it's why I love discussing this stuff with you. It's a lot of fun, which is one of my 3 criteria, by the way.
And you're adding value.
And you're adding value, okay?
Right.
And I'm learning something. I mean, you learn something from every person.
Good. So that means we'll have more conversations.
We definitely will.
Okay.
So again, because we all have problems. One of my problems is this simple analogy thing. So what do I do? And I think about you now, and I role play. So the way I think about this, let's go. So we're going from Chicago to New York. Okay, that's where I'm headed. Now, the way I look at this is during that trip, I'm being very, very thoughtful. So I just got to Pittsburgh. All right, I got to Pittsburgh, and I'm thinking now, yeah, I could go to New York. But let's think about this based on what's important to me, what's important in my life, what may be important in my family, whatever, my calling, whatever. I think going to Tampa may be what I really ought to be doing. What are the pros and cons? What are the impact of that on the 6 buckets? I'm going to Tampa. So now I redirect, and I don't view this as hitting the wall. I don't even view this as a change. This is something now that is an opportunity. And so I'm going to head down to Florida. Now, heading down to Florida, if it turns out because I'm doing that, you know what? I don't have the opportunity to get on the mountain bike. I'm gaining a little bit of weight. Well, okay, let's get off at a rest stop here and maybe do something again. But in my life, think about it, there's going to be changes. There was change for me between being single and married, where both of us are working. A big change of having 5 kids. Okay, so God, I could write a book on that one in itself. That's a book I'm looking for, by the way. So this whole idea of I'm going to be. Oh, in fact, you've just given me the perfect opportunity to mention something related to the next chapter. Well, you're very good, Peter, okay, which I think is called, okay, the art of being planful and spontaneity. And as you can imagine, people say, well, wait a minute. I mean, no, you're either going to be planful or you're going to have spontaneity.
And I remember I want to bring forth this image of the woman who was listening to you, and you were sort of saying, figure out all your hours in a week, where are you spending them, and she said just listening to you made her feel like she was in a straitjacket.
Exactly. Yeah. So Peter, you're very kind to have read all this, because what makes it kind of fun for me is I explained this. Like I said, no, it actually works the opposite. And I'll use my own thing. I don't know how planful you are, Peter, but I'm one of these guys. Here's my math background. I can tell you, of course, now everything's changed, right? This COVID thing. I can always tell you what I'm doing day by day for the next 90 days. I mean, I kind of have that locked and loaded, and I've got my calendar for 21, 22. I've got it, okay? The boards and everything else, I got it. I know when I'm going to Hong Kong the next 6 times. I got it. Now, as I may have mentioned, I've got it. I know what I'm doing next. But if you call me, Peter, I can. By the way, this is true story. If you tell me, Peter, hey, that a week from Friday, you've got 2 extra tickets for Bruce Springsteen, okay, in the Catskills, I will be there. I mean, it's not even a question. I will be there, okay? Because if you're planful, you can, move things around. Versus, I don't know what you were like, Peter, but I knew guys in college that, we got a 20-page paper to do. We got 3 weeks to do it. That night before, they're walking into the room with a cigarette and 25 books saying, don't bother me for the next 8 hours because this is going to be an all-nighter. And if I walk into that room and say, hey, guess what? There's a great movie that there's free on campus. He can't go. I can go because I did like 1/5 of that, okay, every week or so. So in my mind, the more planful you are, the more flexibility you have.
I love it. And it's what, it's what I love about you saying confidence and humility. You're taking these two things and you're saying, and you're holding them. You're not buying into the sort of black and white delineation or dichotomy between them. You're basically saying, be super planful so that you can then, when you need to, because you're using self-reflection, right? Self-reflection, balance, confidence, humility.
Yeah.
So, you're using self-reflection to say, do I need to nudge? Do I need to do it? Maybe it's not even getting off the highway and going to Florida. Maybe it's just taking the scenic route to New York. Maybe it's like making these little nudges in order to continue the self-reflection, in order to stay connected to your values and what's important to you.
Absolutely. And to your point, and you, Peter, you're on so top of this. It's fascinating because often executives, I had a group of CEOs and they got into this and they said, well, now this true self-confidence, genuine humility. And one guy said, maybe I've got too much genuine humility and less of that, more true. And I always keep telling people, to your point, you won both. See, because if you're my boss, way beyond words, and by the way, you can be the CEO and a vice president, or you're a director and I'm a manager, it doesn't matter. But beyond words, what I will convince you of is very simple. Peter, whatever you need to get done, give it to me. I will get it done. With the right group of people, we'll get it done. I'll never let you down. It's going to happen. And at the same time, every single person matters. It isn't about me, okay? And I'm going to give the credit to all these people. But, it's a little bit like you said to me, when did you think you'd be become the CEO? Well, a little crazy story on that one. At the time, I think I was the CFO, and the CEO was kind of a fun story. The CEO always started every meeting with me making a little bit of a presentation. So he said, "Well, Harry, you're not making a presentation today. I got to meet with the boards privately." I thought, "Oh, well, we have Harry, it's only 15 minutes, and then you're going to come in." Well, an hour and a half later, he comes out and I said, "Is everything okay?" No, here's a little bit of a practical joke. So, no, it's not okay. It's not okay at all. I said, "Why is that?" So, well, I basically told the board that I want to retire. And I had things so wired with this guy. I'm thinking, oh man, this guy leaves. That's good. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, well, they don't like the response. They don't like what we're doing, but it's unfortunate, but it's I'm going to jam it. I said, what's that? Well, I told him that you're going to become the CEO. I said, really? And he said, yeah, come on in. And I walked in, and I was a little dazed, right? And one of the board, but I think it was Fred Turner, who was the CEO of McDonald's for me. I was on the board, and he goes, well, you look a little surprised. I said, yeah, I am surprised. And he goes, well, do you think you can do this? I said, Fred, there is no question I can do this, because I know exactly the 200 or 300 people I'm going to need to be able to pull this off. I said, I'm a little surprised, but I will not let you guys do. I will get this done. So it's a little of this true self-confidence, genuine humility. Don't forget where you came from. Oh, I missed you.
Sorry. What I was
Yeah.
saying is, and genuineness. It's like, it's not like you're going to pretend, and it's not going to, like, it's the, like, you are genuinely surprised and also genuinely confident.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. And I think if you can, Peter, if it's part of who you are, you make it. People will tease you. You have a little bit of fun with it. And I don't know if I told you this story, but a great example of you don't forget where you came from. It turned out that I didn't even know this. We have all these buildings, right? Because we have, like, I don't know, several thousand people in Chicago. Well, it turned out when I became the CFO, they called and said, by the way, you can park in the Bat Cave. Like, there's a secret parking lot under. I didn't know it was there. I thought we were with the thousands of people. And they said, so no, you've got your own parking space. Well, everybody always used to tease me that, no matter how well I did, I would say, my father would say, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget where you came from. So, I always had a Toyota that I'd always go to 200,000 miles with. So I got this 8-9-year-old Toyota. So the first day, where this is going. First day, and it's got Harry Kraemer. I'm parked between, like, I don't know, a Maserati and a Porsche, whatever. So I run in, park the car, go to the meeting. And about an hour or two later, the first meeting starts. I'm with the executive committee. And the one guy puts his arm around me. He goes, Harry, we apologize. Trust us. Trust us. It will never happen again. Don't worry about it. I said, what won't happen again? He goes, I don't know. He said, some asshole parked some piece of shit. And he said, we had what? And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, we just had it towed. I said, that's my car. Okay. So I start to
Is that really true? They really had your car towed?
Yeah. No. He said he did. So I got up and he goes, Harry, we didn't tow it. You know what? You're doing pretty well now. I think you ought to get it.
That's funny.
And I purposely never did because.
Right. That's great.
Don't forget where you came from, Peter. Don't forget where you came from.
We have been speaking with Harry Kraemer. His latest book is Your 168. Put your values first and focus on what matters most. You've clearly, I'm sure, and I hope that you've gotten a feel for the kind of person Harry is. Harry, it is such a pleasure always to speak with you, and such a pleasure to have you on the Bregman Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
A lot of fun, Peter.